Kyoto, Japan, winter 1461. 82,000 corpses line the banks of the Kamo River, so many that they dam the current, turning the city's only freshwater source into a stagnant lake of the dead. In the streets, starving men sell their own wives and children to survive. Contemporary chroniclers recorded a horror so complete it broke the oldest human taboo. In the markets of the capital, human flesh was cheaper than dog meat. And 3 blocks from the river, inside a palace surrounded by cherry trees, the most powerful man in Japan is hosting a poetry competition.
I'm Arthur, and today we're reconstructing a city you think you know.
The Kyoto of golden temples and Zen gardens. But before the calm, there was chaos. Before the beauty, there was blood. And the man who built that beauty didn't do it despite the destruction. He did it because of it. This is the story of the city that burned for a decade, lost 80% of everything it had ever built, and then invented the soul of Japan.
To understand how Kyoto broke, you need 2 men.
A grandfather and his grandson. One built an empire of gold. The other watched it collapse and decided the ruins were more beautiful. Ashikaga Yoshimitsu becomes the 3rd Ashikaga shogun in the late 13th century. He is not content to be a military dictator. He wants to be everything. In 1397, he builds the Kintsugi, the Golden Pavilion, 3 stories, 12.5 meters high. Its 2 upper floors sheathed in 20 kilograms of pure gold leaf. The cost exceeds 10,000 kanmon, several years of tax revenue for the entire shogunate. While the imperial court cannot repair its own leaking roof, the shogun covers his pleasure house in gold thick enough to blind you in the afternoon sun. Each floor is designed in a different style. Aristocratic palace architecture at the bottom, samurai military style in the middle, Chinese Zen temple at the top, crowned by a bronze phoenix. The message is vertical. Nobility supports warriors, warriors support enlightenment, and the shogun floats above all 3. Yoshimitsu's ambition reaches beyond Japan. In 1402, he accepts the title of King of Japan from the Chinese Ming Emperor. No one in Japan holds that title, not even the emperor himself. Yoshimitsu bows to Beijing because it gives him a monopoly on trade with China. Zen monks draft the diplomatic letters, manage the missions, handle the money. The shogunate and the Zen establishment are not separate institutions, they are the same machine. Under this patronage, Yoshimitsu takes a street performer named Kanami and his son Zeami and transforms their rough peasant dances into something the world has never seen. No theater. A single masked actor, a bare stage, the weight of an entire story carried by a gesture. The most minimalist theatrical form ever created, polished into art by a dictator who believed beauty was power. Yoshimitsu dies in 1408. He never sees his golden world collapse. That falls to his grandson. Ashikaga Yoshimasa is named the 8th shogun as a boy, barely into his teens. He inherits a government rotting from within. The provincial warlords ignore his orders. The treasury hemorrhages money. Yoshimasa's response is to look away. During the Kansho famine, when 82,000 die in his own capital and their bodies choke the river, Yoshimasa hosts banquets lasting days and imports Chinese porcelain. In a letter to his son, he writes the most honest epitaph for his own government. The daimyo do as they please and do not follow orders. That means there can be no government. But the real power is not the shogun, it is his wife, Hino Tomiko. is a noblewoman with the instincts of a warlord and a fortune built on lending money to the very lords her husband cannot control. When Yoshimasa convinces his brother Yoshimi to leave a monastery and accept the succession, Tomiko barely reacts. Then she gives birth to a son, and her ambition for that child will pull the two most powerful military clans in Japan into a war fought inside the streets of Kyoto.
The Onin War begins over something absurd.
A succession dispute in a family that cannot control its own capital. Yoshimi finds backing from Hosokawa Katsumoto, the shogun's chief deputy. Tomiko secures Yamana Sozen for her infant son. Yamana is known as the Red Monk, not for piety, but for the blood-flushed fury of his face in rage. His contemporaries compare him to the war god incarnate. In January 1467, the tension detonates at the Kamigoryo Shrine. Within weeks, two colossal armies entrench inside Kyoto's narrow streets. Over the course of the war, more than 250,000 armed men cycle through a city built for 150,000 civilians, almost twice as many soldiers as residents. And every one of them is fighting in a city built of wood, paper, and straw. When fire is used as a weapon, entire neighborhoods vanish in hours. The armies dig a trench through the heart of Kyoto, 3 meters deep and 6 meters wide, splitting the city in two. Snipers with bows line both edges for months. The destruction is not accidental, it is tactical. Armies burn temples to clear sightlines. The Shokokuji complex, center of Zen hierarchy, is razed in August 1468. The Tenryuji burns, the Daigoji burns. Monasteries that stood for centuries are consumed in single nights. The Gion festival is canceled for 3 decades. Even the calendar of the gods stops. The soldiers doing the worst damage are not samurai. They are ashigaru, light-footed infantry drawn from the peasant class. No training, no salary, and no armor, because even a basic chest protector costs 2 kanmon, enough rice to feed a man for 2 years. The ashigaru cannot afford to be warriors, so they become something worse, scavengers. They burn warehouses to loot rice from the ashes. They strip dead samurai of their expensive weapons and sell them. They kidnap merchants for ransom. There are accounts of ashigaru selling captured women and children as spoils in the fields outside the capital. These foot soldiers embody Gekkokujo, the defining principle of the era, the low overthrowing the high. A peasant with a bamboo spear can drag an armored lord from his horse and take his head. In the alleys of Kyoto, birth means nothing. Only survival counts. 1 year into the war, the factions switch sides. Yoshimi ends up with the Western Army. The East backs Yoshihisa. The cause evaporates, but the killing continues. Both commanders die of illness in 1473. The war should end. It does not. In December 1477, the last Western general burns his own section of the city and marches home. Kyoto has lost 80% of its buildings. Its population has collapsed from 150,000 to roughly 40,000. This is the fire that will forge everything Japan becomes. But someone is still living in the ashes, and they are about to do something no one expected.
When the armies leave, the commoners remain.
Merchants, sake brewers, artisans, the people who were never supposed to matter. They look at the ruins and make a decision. If the shogun cannot protect them, they will protect themselves. What emerges from the rubble is one of the most surprising political experiments in medieval history. Each machi, each neighborhood block of 20 to 50 households, begins to function as an autonomous micro-republic. Heads of households gather in assemblies called yoriai, where they debate and vote by majority. They elect their own leaders and write their own laws. These written codes, machi okite, regulate everything. Mandatory water barrels for fire prevention, curfews enforced by the residents themselves, the absolute prohibition of sheltering unidentified strangers or masterless samurai. Violators face fines, exile, or worse. Residents organize yomawari, night watch patrols, staffed by rotating shifts of men who walked the dark streets, striking thick wooden sticks, the rhythmic clacking a warning to bandits and a reminder to check the charcoal braziers that heat every fragile wooden house. They build palisades of sharpened bamboo around their blocks, dig defensive ditches, and install heavy wooden gates at both ends of every street, locking them at sundown. By 1500, more than 200 neighborhoods in southern Kyoto operate under these systems. The open imperial capital has become a hive of barricaded fortresses, each governed by its own citizens. The first form of civil self-government in Japanese urban history, invented not by scholars or lords, but by shopkeepers and sake brewers who simply refused to die. In the 1530s, the commoners go further. Tens of thousands of merchants and artisans who follow Nichiren Buddhism organize a massive uprising. For nearly 4 years, they expel feudal armies from large sections of Kyoto and establish an independent communal government. Their own courts, their own tolls, their own militia, a medieval city governing itself without samurai, without shoguns, without an emperor. The rebellion is eventually crushed and the city burns again, but it proves that a metropolis can survive without the aristocracy that claims to own it. Meanwhile, debt revolts terrorize the financial class. Organized mobs armed with sickles and bamboo spears storm the moneylenders' vaults, tear apart the ledgers, and burn loan documents in the streets. Between 1428 and 1500, at least 26 of these revolts shake the capital. Bloody, chaotic, but effective economic justice in a state too broken to provide any other kind. The powerful are gone. The people remain. But the deadliest force in Kyoto is not an army. It is the daily reality of living where beauty and horror share the same street.
Step inside the city, and the first thing that hits you is the smell.
Charred wood, stagnant sewage in the military trenches, incense burning on Buddhist altars, failing to mask the stench of the unburied dead. You walk through machiya, the narrow townhouses where commoners live and work. The city taxes frontage width, so the machiya stretch deep into the block like dark tunnels, sometimes only 3 meters wide. The locals call them unagi no nedoko, eel beds. In wartime, entire blocks burn in minutes. What you eat depends on who you are. A Zen monk eats refined vegetarian cuisine with spices imported from China. An imperial aristocrat survives on dwindling rations, wearing 12-layered silk robes inside a palace with leaking ceilings and rats on the tatami. A commoner merchant eats millet and barley, saving rice for taxes. In famine, refugees eat pine bark and boiled roots. Everything is priced in copper mon imported from China. A liter of sake costs 15 mon. A night in a flea-infested inn, 30. Epidemics of smallpox and measles tear through the population in cycles, killing children in waves. Lethal influenza sweeps the city repeatedly in the 1420s, 1450s, and 1460s, compounded by famine. And then there is the emperor. In the year 1500, Emperor Go Tsuchimikadomo dies. The imperial treasury is so depleted that his body remains unburied for 43 days. Later accounts suggest decomposition had begun before enough donations could be gathered for a funeral. the shogun's grandfather, covered a pavilion in 20 kilograms of gold. The emperor's corpse rots in a storage room because no one can afford to bury a god. At night, the people barricade their streets and listen for the striking sticks of the Yomawari. In the darkness, they believe the Hyakki Yagyo walks, the night parade of 100 demons. Vengeful spirits of the betrayed, rising from Kyoto's blood-soaked ground to walk the ruined avenues, consuming the soul of anyone caught outside. In a city where the dead dam rivers and the living sell their families, the boundary between the real and the supernatural has vanished. The people burn charms and whisper prayers, terrified that the horrors they have seen by daylight are only the beginning of what moves after dark. But one institution has not collapsed. It has grown more powerful with every fire. The Zen monasteries sit behind thick walls, their estates untouched, their trade routes still flowing with Chinese silk and copper coin. And inside those walls, the most explosive rebel in the history of Japanese religion is about to set the establishment ablaze.
Zen Buddhism in medieval Kyoto is not a spiritual retreat, it is a parallel government. The Gozan system, the Five Mountains hierarchy, controls Kyoto's most powerful monasteries. Their monks draft every diplomatic treaty in classical Chinese. They manage trade missions to Beijing. They administer vast estates. Zen is the state's brain, its treasury, and its foreign ministry. Inside this machine, its fiercest enemy is born. Ikkyu Sojun, rumored illegitimate son of the emperor, is raised in the monastery system. He masters its theology, then he turns on it. When he receives his official certificate of enlightenment, the Inca, he burns it in front of his superiors. If enlightenment can be bought and sold, he wants no part of it. He writes the Kyomshu, the Crazy Cloud anthology. If you come tomorrow and ask for me, he writes, I will be in a fish shop, in a tavern, or else in a brothel. This is not nihilism, it is radical theology. Ikkyu argues that the Buddha exists more purely in human need, in dirty streets, in physical desire, than in gold-adorned halls. He haunts taverns, he visits pleasure houses, and writes about it, and far from being dismissed, he is revered. The shogun invites him to debate. The emperor sends for him. At 77, Ikkyu enters an open love affair with Mori, a young blind street singer. He dedicates explicit erotic poetry to her, equating intimacy with the ultimate awakening. In an era of enforced monastic celibacy, he parades his love through the capital and dares anyone to call it unholy. Through Ikkyu, Zen escapes the cloisters and enters the arts of ordinary people: calligraphy, poetry, tea. The message is devastating. You do not need a temple, gold, or rank. You need honesty and a willingness to see beauty in what is broken. A monk trained in that same world takes the idea and applies it to a cup of tea. Murata Juko creates the Wabi-Cha in a room of 4.5 tatami mats. Rough bowls, silence, presence. But he needs a patron, and the only man reckless enough to fund a revolution in a cup of tea is building a silver pavilion on the ashes of the war he helped cause.
Ashikaga Yoshimasa may be the worst ruler in Japanese history. He ignores famines, he triggers civil wars, he abandons his capital to burn. And yet, without him, the thing the world calls Japanese culture might not exist. In 1482, Yoshimasa retreats to the eastern hills and builds the Ginkakuji, the Silver Pavilion. He plans it as an echo of his grandfather's gold, but the treasury is empty. The building never receives its silver. Historians debate whether it was poverty or philosophy. Some argue the bare wood was deliberate, a Zen choice to honor what is unfinished. Others say he simply ran out of money. The answer may be both, and either way, the dark, unadorned Ginkakuji becomes something the blinding gold never could. A mirror of the idea that imperfection is the point. Wabi-Sabi, the beauty of the worn, the incomplete, the transient. It emerges directly from the ruins of the Onin War. A generation of artists watches everything burn and decides that if beauty cannot be permanent, impermanence itself must be beautiful. The legend connecting this to Yoshimitsu is irresistible. He owns a favorite Chinese tea bowl that breaks. He sends it to China, but the design is obsolete. It returns repaired with ugly metal staples. Yoshimitsu orders his craftsmen to find a beautiful repair. They fill the cracks with lacquer mixed with powdered gold. The broken bowl becomes more beautiful than the original. Kintsugi, golden joinery. The man who broke Japan demands that his craftsmen find beauty in what is broken. And the people who build the great icons of this era are not the ones you would expect. The sublime rock gardens, the Kare-san-sui, are often built by Kawaramono, the riverbank outcasts. Considered ritually impure by the rigid caste system, relegated to heavy labor like tanning hides and hauling stones, these pariahs spend their lives moving boulders. And precisely because of that, they develop an unmatched understanding of how a single rock can evoke an entire mountain, how empty gravel can suggest an infinite ocean. The anonymous untouchables of Kyoto become the landscape architects of gardens the world will revere for 600 years, the most celebrated expression of Zen beauty, created by the hands society considered most unclean. Alongside them, ikebana, the art of arranging flowers according to principles of asymmetry and emptiness, matures in the monasteries and villas of Higashiyama. Inkwash painting, suibokuga, reaches its peak under masters who use nothing but black ink and white space to evoke entire mountain ranges. Every art form emerging from this period shares the same DNA. Less is more. Silence speaks louder than noise. What is absent matters as much as what is present. These are not abstract philosophies, they are survival strategies. When everything you own has burned, you learn to find meaning in what remains. In 1568, Oda Nobunaga marches into Kyoto with 30,000 soldiers. What he finds is not a defeated city. It is something stranger. Nobunaga finds a capital in ruins. Entire neighborhoods are fields of ash and weeds. The imperial palace is crumbling. The last Ashikaga shogun lives like a prisoner in a broken wing of his own headquarters. The chroniclers who travel with Nobunaga describe the scene without sentiment. The capital that once shone with gold and silver is now a heap of rubble where only crows and beggars remain. In 1573, Nobunaga expels the last shogun, and the Ashikaga dynasty ends after more than 2 centuries. But Nobunaga does not destroy Kyoto, he respects it. Because the city that has no army, no walls, no functioning government possesses something no warlord can take by force. It possesses an idea. Every art form the world calls Japanese was born or perfected in this burning city. No theater, created from peasant dances under a shogun who covered his house in gold. The tea ceremony, stripped to silence by a monk who learned that enlightenment lives in a cracked bowl. Rock gardens designed by outcasts whose hands society called impure. All of it forged in the same fire that destroyed 80% of the city. Kyoto burned for a decade. It lost almost everything. And from those ashes, a shogun who could not govern created a culture that would define a civilization. A monk who broke every rule proved that beauty lives in imperfection, and ordinary people who were never supposed to matter
built a city that would outlast every army, every emperor, and every war. The temples you visit today in Kyoto are not survivors of the fire. They are children of it. Every rock in every Zen garden, every crack sealed with gold, every silence in a tea room, that is the sound of a city that refused to let destruction be the end of the story.
Watching Kyoto burn and rise again is incredible, but what happens when a city refuses to fall for 1,000 years?
My reconstruction of Constantinople is already up on the channel. Megacities, deadly plagues, and spy monks who stole imperial secrets. You've got to see the scale of what we built there.
Subscribe to help the community grow, and let me know in the comments, which other city wiped off the map should we revive next? See you on the next journey. Goodbye.
Before we finish, I want to take a moment to recognize the people appearing on screen right now. To the members of this channel, thank you so much. Your ongoing support is what motivates me and helps keep this project alive. If you enjoy what we do here and would like to directly support the channel, I invite you to click the Join button down below. To our members and to everyone who is simply watching this video, thank you for your time.